John F. Kennedy said these words: USA could not declare itself the champion of freedom throughout the world while maintaining a system of racial inequality at home. I would like to start with Danny Ortega. Danny, can you help us to connect the two and the importance of the civil rights movement?
Well, I have a saying about how things evolve over time, specifically from the legal world, and it's the wheels of justice move slow, but they keep moving.
Wow, say that again, please.
Okay? The wheels of justice move slow, but they keep moving.
It's a painful reality.
Yeah, you know, and the reality is that within a legal system, within the structure of government as it exists today in this country and has existed for over 200 years, things don't happen as fast as we would like. And they don't happen as fast as we would like because we have challenges, behaviors, norms, customs. You know, when you talk about race, when you talk about gender, when you talk about disability, when you talk about creed, all of those things, we all bring to the table a diversity of thought. But at the end of the day, we're still controlled by norms. And those norms many times are not founded in the core values of why it is this country was created or of the humanity that exists between us, though we are different in many ways.
Right.
And so this country in particular faced probably one of its biggest challenges in the 1860s. And that was to finally abolish slavery. And we had a civil war over it.
Wow.
It wasn't a matter of getting up one day and saying, you know, it's just not right to enslave people or to have people as property.
Right.
Right? It took a war to get the country to come to grips with the idea that people couldn't be property.
That's why I said it's a painful reality. Why does it have to cause so much suffering, you know, before we act?
Yeah, and so the time has always been a factor in how we evolve as a country and how our core values finally rise up to recognize everybody.
Right.
No matter the color of the skin, no matter the gender, no matter how they're brought to this world or what occurs on their existence, that we all have to be treated equally and given an opportunity to excel.
The civil rights movement has to be a very, very critical chapter in the history of this country. And I was doing a little research, as I have to do to conduct this show, and it unleashed a lot of stuff in the 60s primarily. Can you walk us through some of the things that were unleashed, some of the movements that are linked to the civil rights movement?
Well, I think as it relates to our communities, and we're talking about communities of color, the civil rights movement was a whole new way of approaching politics and to fight discrimination and to fight inequality. And it really started with the African American community.
Right.
By the way, over time, we also have different labels. Even within all communities have different labels. I mean, when I was a kid, you know, I was a Mexican, right? And then I became a Mexican American, and then I became an Hispanic. And then one time I was Chicano first, and then an Hispanic. Now I'm Latino. Who knows what I'm going to be 10 years from now, right?
And all this was literally unleashed. These movements, I mean, the African American community emboldened themselves and helped embolden other communities to get out and start to believe that they could generate change. You're talking about the Latinos, Native Americans too. And then women began, and then the LGBT community. So it's an amazing part of the American history, this civil rights movement that unleashed so many activities and movements.
Well, I think that the key to my original point was that once it was the Negro community and the black community, now it's the African American community. But back then, Mexican Americans and the black community began to believe that they should have equal rights. Right. And when they began to believe, it started with the African American community.
Danny, again, the civil rights for blacks, it was key. I'm sure there's still a lot of issues for Latino, the Cesar Chavez, the unions, the labor. You're talking about women with rights, also the gay community. Can you elaborate a little bit more about how crucial this time in the U.S. history was and continues to be?
Well, I think that the 60s was a different time for this country. And it's faced different challenges as its growth. We're still a young country,
right,
and we're still growing. But at the end of the day, people began to recognize that they weren't being allowed to grow to their potential because of the discriminatory acts, laws. I mean, all of the things that the inequality that President Kennedy talked about, racial inequality, was just a part of our culture. You began to believe as a Mexican American back then that you worked after you got out of the 8th grade, or you worked after you got out of high school, that you didn't have the opportunity to go on to college because you just simply didn't have it. Those schools were for other people. To me, it was that's, as my mom used to say, mijo, ¿de dónde vamos a sacar el dinero para pagar que vayas a la escuela?
Right.
Eso es para los ricos. And what that meant, so how are we going to be able to afford to send you to school? That's for rich people. And for us, rich people were Anglos.
Yeah.
White.
And you know, Danny, the coin has two sides, and there's still a lot of suffering. There's still a lot of things we don't like that take place in our country, especially these days. But on the other hand, when the Constitution has to be the solid foundation that serve as the anchor from which a lot of people clinch to, right? To believe. And like you said, the word believe, just to believe that you can advocate, just to believe that you can go out on the street and to fight for rights, just the concept of believing, it's an amazing thing and a powerful one too.
Yeah, but you have to remember that this country was, the documents that this country was created under, which is the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, these were written by people who set out the core values of what we were going to be as a country, but they were slave owners. Okay?
Right.
So you see the contradiction here? So it came in the 60s when we finally, in the 1960s, when we finally began to realize that those documents meant something.
Right.
And they meant something for everybody, not just for a few.
Go
I think
ahead,
what's
Dan.
important here is, on kind of a parallel, it's because you were of a different color of skin, you simply weren't smart enough. Okay? You simply weren't capable enough as those who were the majority in this country. I mean, so we had to deal with this situation, some with disabilities and a new norm. Well, our norm was, well, that those colleges weren't made for us to go to, right? Simply because of the norm, not because we weren't capable. And I think that those norms, those ideas, those beliefs, right, really set up barriers. And with disabilities, it's physical. With those of us who don't have disabilities, it's mental. I mean, you begin to believe these things that because you are this color, you're not capable of succeeding the way others do.
So these barriers of concepts that a society may adopt, they become powerful. And I'll say it again, barriers that it takes sometimes years for people to break through and
centuries.
Centuries. That's unbelievable. That's why I believe that freedom to think is unbelievable. You know, to be able to think, to bring in new concepts, new ideas. And the people, that's why I always say thank you for your service. You know, I love this phrase because yes, we have used this phrase for, military personnel who have served, but so many people in the world, in the country, have done so much to move us forward, to make us, to strengthen us, to help us to dare to think and to act and to inspire and to join movements to create change.
Well, and we in our community perpetuate those barriers. At the end of the day, whether it be physical or social or mental, whatever it is, we need to knock down barriers, and that was what the civil rights movement was all about.
But this is so practical that it goes even to a parent, the way we talk to our children, in the different scenarios. And we have had the pleasure of having Danny Ortega, who has been expounding on the civil rights movement and as the context that triggers so many movements for people who started believing that they did not have to accept their situation and that they could advocate and fight for what had a solid foundation in the U.S. Constitution, basically. Because if we don't have the Constitution, we wouldn't have a basis to kind of argue, because it would just be me against you. But that document is there as a solid foundation to dare to believe that we can change. And amazing, isn't it, Danny?
Yes. What was important about the 60s is people's belief that they were equal. Simple.
Equality equality is basically, if you had to summarize the Constitution, it would have to be equality, right?
At the end of the day, that I have the same opportunities,
Right.
despite the color of my skin, despite gender, despite a whole bunch of other things, to be successful, to succeed if I simply were allowed to work hard to get there.
Right.
I wasn't asking for any handouts. I was simply asking for the opportunity to use those abilities that I was given as a human being to not only help myself, my family, and my community in this country.
And I have to come back to that word equality, because that's what it's all about. I think if you had to summarize the Constitution, equality. We believe that all men are created equal.
Yeah.
Now we have to put people are created equal.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. Danny, again, coming back to civil rights movement, what it shows is there's so many meanings and so critical. How would you summarize it, and especially in the days that we're living today?
Well, we're having a resurgence of some of the challenges that we had in this country early, and it has to do with the most vulnerable among us. And of course, the challenges that we're facing today have to do with immigrant communities, and the fact that race and animus has raised its head again in a way that we didn't expect, because of the challenges that we met in the 60s and the 70s. And we have to be realistic that even though we've had progress in this country as it relates to people's civil rights, as it relates to equality, as it relates to abolishing discrimination, there is still a segment of our society who wants to make America great again. And what that means is that they want it to go back to what it used to be, not what it is today. And to go back to what it used to be is exactly what we don't want.
It's not a good place to
It's
go.
not a good place because of the racial animus, because of the inequality, and because all of the things that we fought so hard. But you can't deal with a hurt if you don't know where it is, right? You can't deal with disease if you don't know what it is. And you can't deal with racial animus or gender animus or things of that nature unless you know where it is. And I think this is a great opportunity for all Americans to see what's going on around this country and how we can make it better, no different than the 60s and the 70s.
Thank you so much. This was AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection. Have a great day.